Hi, this is Esther with Discover Your Origins. I've been doing a video series on William Fuller, and it was based off of a research suggestion submitted by a viewer. And if you're interested in submitting some suggestions to me, I have a link in the description box below. But we've been focusing on William Fuller for a few videos now, and we mostly have focused on record analysis, documents, trying to create a timeline and understand and identify places where we could do some more research and correlating all the evidence that we did have. But that's only part of William Fuller's story. There is actually some other really interesting things about William Fuller, and we're going to dive into that today in this video. The research suggestion that was submitted to me included this really interesting snippet. And maybe you're going to ask, why didn't I start with this? Because it's the most interesting thing. But we had to really understand William Fuller and what we knew about him before we dove into some of this other stuff. So I hope you got your seatbelt on because this is going to be a ride. So let's jump over to part of the little snippet of the research suggestion. And this says, William Fuller was a businessman who, in partnership with Orlando Saltmarsh, established and operated post routes for the United States Post Office Department. Before Abraham Lincoln was president, he wrote some documents about William Fuller because apparently William Fuller didn't get paid, even though he had delivered mail. So, interesting, right? How many of us have an ancestor that would have been associated with Abraham Lincoln? I think it's really cool. But this means that there are documents about William Fuller, and we need to go find them and add them to William Fuller's profile on Family Search or WikiTree or wherever he's the person who submitted this is keeping their tree. It would be really cool if it were in Family Search because it really adds to a story and provides that evidence that we need to track William Fuller through time. How do we figure out where we can find these records and these documents? So first, let's see if we can figure out when Abraham Lincoln would have done this. It wouldn't have been when he was president because he was dealing with the Civil War. So this would be before he was president. And could it have been when he was a lawyer or something else? So let's go and look. And I pulled up the Wikipedia article here for Abraham Lincoln, and we've got a really great picture of what Abraham looked like in 1846. So even cooler, we know what he looked like and who William Fuller would have been talking to. Before Abraham Lincoln became president of the United States, he was a lawyer. So above this here talks about how he was in the state legislature. He was in practice as a lawyer with Stephen Logan and William Herndon. And then he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives between 1847 and 1849. When he was in the U.S. House of Representatives, he was assigned to the Committee on Post Office and Post Roads. So that would explain why he would have written a bill or documents for William Fuller to get him paid. So it makes me wonder if William Fuller traveled to Washington, D.C. during this time. It would explain why he was there, how he met his second wife, all of that kind of thing. And so we need to maybe consider spending more time looking in records in Washington, D.C. for William Fuller. But there are a lot of records for Congress, and the way to find those would be the National Archives. There's also a lot of papers and documents for Abraham Lincoln. So how do we find those? And the first place I went was the National Archives. So here is the papers of Abraham Lincoln that the research suggestion said had documents on William Fuller. And again, we got a picture of Abraham Lincoln. It's a little bit later, 1864, but the Papers of Abraham Lincoln has its own website. There is also a separate website, which we're not going to look at right now, but on the law practice of Abraham Lincoln. So all the documents of when he was acting as a lawyer, which is fascinating. But we're going to look at the papers of Abraham Lincoln. And so I've got this site up here, and it's a search engine of the digitized documents relating to Abraham Lincoln. Now, I don't think it's everything. I think it's a lot of things. Because when I searched the National Archives, there's like 41,000 pages of documents. And I don't think they're all on this website, but this has a lot of them. And they are digitized, and you can also search. So this is really cool. You can search by text, you can search by a recipient, author, if you have the document type. You can do it by date range. And so I did this earlier, so forgive me, I already know what's going to happen, but I just did a search for William Fuller as a text keyword search. And so let's see what we get. All right, so up here at the top, we get a report on the petition of William Fuller and Orlando Saltmarsh, 1848. And there's two of these documents here. Actually, there's three, so we're going to look at them. Also, there is another page here for persons. So any of the people that are mentioned in these documents has their own web page on here. And so we're also going to look at that. But let's first look at this report on the petition of William Fuller and Orlando Saltmarsh. Okay, so the original document is right here in the upper left. This is the original petition. And then there's a transcription here. So I would recommend, if you can, actually getting this original document, and you can actually download it. This should be added to the memories page on Family Search. Let's go back and look at the transcription. So this talks about where William Fuller was, what his mail route was, and we would need to map it to see if it goes through Montgomery, because his first wife, Augusta Root, dies in Montgomery. So if his postal route went through Montgomery, Alabama, that explains why she was there, if she was with him. And but it talks about the mail route from Milledge to Athens and from Warrenton to Decatur in the state of Georgia. So, and that's postal routes 2366 and 2380. And there are some other people who are mentioned in this document. We've got Saltmarsh and Fuller. And these links go to their pages on here that gives a little profile of who they are. And then we've got Reside and Avery. So these are two other individuals who were involved in this particular contract. It talks about what their pay was supposed to be, how long it was supposed to be. And you can see here, it was supposed to start the first day of January, 1835. And anyway, you should go through this document and add these dates to the timeline that we've created previously for William Fuller. And then also take note of each name or person that is mentioned in this document. We especially want to know more about Saltmarsh and also Reside and Avery. So this website here has links to who these individuals are, at least a little bit of information. So here's about Orlando Saltmarsh, and as we need to look him up and learn more about him so that we can see what association he may have had with William Fuller. And maybe they have no connection other than this, but we need to know. And also, there's that document. Let's go back. We can look at William Fuller's page here. It doesn't have a whole lot. It just says he was a businessman who was in partnership. This page also links to some other documents related. So we were looking at the petition. So then there is a bill of relief. So this would have been the document, the bill that Abraham Lincoln would have written on behalf of William Fuller. And you can see right here up at the top, read twice and committed to committee. Mr. Lincoln from the committee on the post office reported the following bill. So how cool is that, right? I mean, it's not cool that he hadn't gotten paid, but that Abraham Lincoln advocated on his behalf in Congress. This is really cool. So again, here is the original document. This should be added with a source citation to Family Search. And again, go through this document and pull out all the bits of information that are important about William Fuller. And, it says in here they had their contract, where the contract was, and the dates. I think there's some dates in here. So that's really important. Let's go and grab that other document here. This is the act. So this is what was actually approved in 1849. So you can see the results of that. And they were awarded their payments minus expenses, whatever that was. So I don't know. But this gives some dates here that they were to manage this route from the 1st of January 1835 until the 31st of December 1838. So now we can place William Fuller in Georgia and Alabama probably during that time frame. And so we can add that to our timeline, and we now have evidence for it. Again, this document should be added to the Family Search Memories for William Fuller. So really cool. And it does provide some evidence and some names of some other individuals. And so we definitely want to learn more about Orlando Saltmarsh and see if we can't learn more about him and if there's any connection to William Fuller's origins. And so when you can't find any documents or information about your research objective, your focus person, you research the friends, associates, and neighbors. And Orlando Saltmarsh would be either friend and or associate. And so anyway, there's more. So let's keep going, because the Wikipedia article here had a link to the Committee on the Post Office and Post Roads. So there's a Wikipedia article here, and this talks about this committee that it has been in existence for until 1946, because Congress oversees the post office. And I'm surprised we still don't have a committee on this. Maybe we do. It's just been moved to another committee. And anyway, there are documents about the post office. And so how do we find those? And down here at the bottom of this article on the committee is the National Archives reference for these documents. And it's right here, Record Group 233. So I went back to the National Archives and I did some digging, and I found the record group. And so up here at the top, if you want the URL to this exact record group, it's right here. But this record collection is only partially available online. So most likely you would have to travel to the National Archives to view these documents. But these documents contain a lot of things. So there was a variety of things regarding the building of roads and paying people and all that kind of stuff. And so here is a description of what's in these documents. It says many of these documents involve the salaries of postmasters and other employees of the post office. Includes various documents related to the committee and the establishment of postal roads. There were claims and petitions, usually submitted by post office employees or persons who contracted to carry the mails. It's possible that the documents that are at the website on the papers for Abraham Lincoln is all that is in there, but I have a feeling there might be more. And so it may be worth going to the National Archives and going through these documents to see if there are more, because I bet William Fuller wrote more than one letter or petition to the post office to get paid. And there should be some evidence of the contract, his original contract. Before we even get to the petition, there should be some other documents. And we also needed to figure out which Congress the committee would have been looking at William Fuller. So I went to a search and I found out that 1847 to 1849, when Lincoln was on that committee, was the 30th Congress. And so going back here, you can see there's a description here and then the various collections. And here is the 30th Congress. So I went to that one. This particular span of documents are not available online. So you will have to go to the National Archives, but it does say it is available to look at. It's unrestricted. And there are 4 linear feet and 3 linear inches. So you would need to have some time to go through these. Now, I'm not an expert at going to the National Archives. It may be worth contacting a researcher to see if it's worth looking at these papers to see if there isn't anything else in relation to this. Now, if he did work for the post office probably has a separate record collection. And so I did go to the post office here, and there's a page on postal history. And so I would recommend going through here and seeing if you can find some more information. So the post office website also has a resources page that could be really useful. And you can see here, there is a research library dedicated to the post office. And there is a historian in Washington, D.C., and some other things here related. And so definitely worth exploring these resources to see what else we can find out about the postal routes that William Fuller would have been working, and if there's any other documents related to his attempts to get paid. I think it's really interesting that he had to work so hard to get paid. I mean, he finished his job in 1838 and he didn't get paid until 1849. So it took him 10 years after his service contract with the post office ended to get paid. And that was only after petitioning Congress. So there's got to be some other things here related to that case. And so possibly one of these other archives or resources may be useful. And there are quite a few documents related to the post office at the Library of Congress. And who knows, like there's pictures. And so maybe you can find postal history that may be of use for the time period that we're looking at, the early 1830s. I don't know. I think there's a lot of potential here. So I just did this general search here, and we can narrow down 1800 to 1899. Okay, so here are the results for records at the Library of Congress that have to do with the post office from 1800 to 1899, and it looks like we can narrow it down even further. We know that the time period in which William Fuller was working for the post office based on these papers. So let's see, let's double check. 1835 to 1838. So we can narrow down even further. Okay, so here we are. We're now 1830 to 1839, and we can continue to narrow down, but this will get us closer. We've got 16,000 documents, so it's still quite a lot to go through. But I think there may be some interesting things in here. If someone is inclined to go through them and try to find more on William Fuller. Oh, look here, this is interesting. Contracts, Post Office Department, 1835. Letter from the Postmaster General transmitting a statement of all the contracts which have been made. He could very well be mentioned in this document because his contract started in 1835. So I think there are some interesting possibilities looking through these documents to find more on William Fuller. So definitely check out the Library of Congress and look through the post office documents. A lot of these are digitized, so you may be able to find them. If they're not, then you maybe go to Library of Congress yourself or hire a researcher to do a lookup for you on some specific records or books. So I think there's a lot of interesting possibilities to do some research on the post office history, especially down in Georgia, because that's where he was. I think, that would be a really interesting thing to go and look at. All right, so back to William Fuller. The next steps are to get those documents from the papers of Abraham Lincoln, add them to William Fuller's memories here, add some source citations for those documents, and see what we can learn from these documents as other avenues of research. And so while I didn't do a lot of research live here, I did look at some of these before recording. I think that makes for a very interesting story and interesting possibilities. And so I hope the person who submitted this just runs with this, because I think it's really interesting. And the potential there, finding more, is high. Now, the post office problem and not getting paid ended by 1849. That was during the period of time when he gets married to Susan Taylor Black in 1843. So that would explain why they're in Washington, D.C. And so we need to spend some time between 1838 and 1849 looking for records for the Fuller family in Washington, D.C. Now, it is curious because his sons say they were born in New York, so he could have been traveling back and forth. It's not really clear. And then he also had to have started other employment after his contract with the post office ended. And there's some indication that he was buying and selling land, whether for himself or on behalf of others. Definitely need to look at records for Washington, D.C. and New York, Richmond County, Staten Island area, and to try and understand. And so my suggestion to look in archives in New York is still valid, because I think there may be some records there as well. There are some town records and everything, and so we'll get into a little bit more of that in the next video. But I hope this was interesting, and also, taking a look at some additional record collections. I hope that encourages you to do a deeper dive into things like this. It definitely makes for an interesting story. In the next video, we're going to talk about forgery and crime and courts and all that good stuff. So stay tuned for that. We'll see you next time.